Hey Girl Scouts, it's Kate, the Digital Media Specialist for Girl Scouts Heart of Michigan, and today we are going to explore one of the 4 camp properties that we have here at Girl Scouts Heart of Michigan, and that's Camp 𝗿𝗲. Not only is it a great place for your family to go camping or your troop, but they actually have a couple events that we host throughout the year to show the magic of Camp 𝗿𝗲. One of my favorite magical parts about Camp 𝗿𝗲 is that we actually have lots of maple trees there, and we produce our own maple syrup there. And it comes in a nice little bottle like this, and we have it for sale if we have extra every year that we produce, but it's one of the magical things that I love about Camp 𝗿𝗲. So we're going to talk about how you can sign up for the Maple Syrup Day event out at Camp 𝗿𝗲 coming up soon, and since it happens to be snowing outside, I'm also going to show you how you can make maple syrup candy with the snow. So stay tuned for that later in the video, but let's get started with talking about what you can do out at Camp 𝗿𝗲 for Maple Syrup Day.
When you first get to camp for Maple Syrup Day, you'll learn about the different types of trees that are out there and how the sap is actually produced and the science behind it when you're tapping the trees. Next, you'll get hands-on experience with the tools that you'll be using to tap the trees, and you'll practice on a piece of board before you actually go to tap the trees. There's also different types of activities like taste testing the difference between maple syrup in the store versus the ones that are made out at camp, and see if you can taste the difference between store-bought and pure maple syrup. You'll even get to try a little piece of maple candy, and you'll get to take home a little vial of maple syrup from Camp 𝗿𝗲 too. And before you head out to start tapping the trees, you can even take a look at the process that's already started for trees that have already been tapped, and how they boil down the sap and the process started to make the maple syrup. The first step to getting the sap out of the trees is to drill a hole. Once the hole is drilled, then you'll put in the spile, and that's how the sap will start to come out of the tree. You can even see a little bit of clear liquid right here of the sap that's already started to come out. For this to actually work, it needs to be the perfect temperature for the sap to actually start flowing through the trees too. And that's typically in March, April that we start tapping the trees and collecting the sap. Once the spile's in, then you'll connect the tube to the spile so that it starts draining. And it can be a little tough to get it in. Then, after that, you put the other side of the tube down into the bucket, and you make sure that that is hammered on good with the lid so it doesn't spill over, and then it just starts collecting the sap. Once the buckets are full, then girls or staff members will take them in, and then they'll start the process of boiling.
What you'll need to make the maple syrup candy with the snow is obviously snow, and then you'll also need a saucepan to boil it, and then you'll also need, if you have one, a candy thermometer so you cook it to just the right temperature, and then you'll want a spatula to stir the maple syrup so that way it doesn't burn, because it can burn if you do it for too long, and then some popsicle sticks for when you get to the snow part, and then you can roll the maple syrup candy on it like taffy, and then eat it.
Before we get started on the boiling process, we want to make sure that our snow is prepared, because it's a pretty quick process once the boiling starts. You want to make sure that you find a nice clean patch of white snow, so make sure there's no dirt or yellow spots in the snow that you pick out. You can do it directly on the snow, but make sure it's the right type of snow before you get started. This snow that I'm using here is a little bit fluffier than I expected, so I'm going to compact it as much as I can, and then I'm going to actually put it in the freezer for a few hours just to make it a little more stiff and ice-like. First, you'll want to pour about 1/4 a cup of maple syrup into your pot, and then turn it on medium heat. Alright, once it starts to bubble a little bit, you want to make sure you're keeping a really careful eye on it, because it can bubble over and start to foam up. And also make sure you stir it on the sides, because that's where it can tend to stick and get hardened and burn. Once it reaches the 235 on your candy thermometer, then you know it's at the right temperature to make this in the snow. Another way you can test it if you don't have a candy thermometer is just to take a small little drop of it and put it in water and see if it hardens into a small ball. If it does, then it's ready. Once the maple syrup reaches the right temperature, you'll want to move quickly to make sure it gets onto the snow in the right amount of time. I put it right next to it so it was ready to go in the Pyrex, and I could just simply pour it onto the snow. You can do it in fancy patterns, or you can do it in strips and rows like this. However it works for you. Then quickly after pouring, you want to make sure you take your popsicle sticks and stick it on one end of the maple syrup candy. That way, when it hardens, it sticks to your popsicle stick as well. Once it's cooled down for a few seconds, all you need to do is take your popsicle stick and start twirling it on there like taffy. Then you'll have a nice little candy treat on the end of your popsicle stick.
Alright, and now to try it. It's solidified enough on here that I can try it and it's not too hot. That's really good. It's super sweet, obviously maple syrup, but it's got a taffy mixture to it too. So good.
It should be noted that this will not work without pure maple syrup or the right consistency of snow. That is why I recommend that you put this Pyrex in the freezer for a bit so it stiffens and makes it nice and hard and icy, and to make sure that you're using pure maple syrup and not something else from the store that isn't.
Alright, and that's all that we have for today. I hope you enjoyed exploring Camp of the Hills with me and learning about maple syrup, and hopefully you can make it out to our Maple Syrup Day at Camp of the Hills in March, and if you do, you'll even get to take home a little sample of maple syrup to take home and try it with pancakes or waffles or whatever you want. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.